you think about the hiring of Jeff Saturday and the Colts, and is it the right fit?
Well, I think we'll find out if he's the right fit, just in terms of him getting hired by Jim Irsay. I think everybody was really taken aback by that, and my opinion is I think it's an insult to all assistant coaches around the NFL,
Oh, wow.
who are aspiring head coaches, that Jimmy Irsay hired Jeff Saturday, who has no real coaching experience. I know he's been coaching his son's team, high school team, I think it is, in
Yep.
Georgia, but that's not what you consider to be standard preparation for being an NFL head coach. So I think, I'm not saying that he's not going to be a good head coach. We don't know. He's got no track record to fall back on to try to predict how he's going to do. The thing I'll be looking for Sunday when they play the Raiders is how hard are these guys going to play for him? Have they bought into what he's been telling them during the week, or are they looking at him like, what's this guy doing here? So I think it's a fascinating situation, but at the same time, I think it's an embarrassing situation for the NFL that one of its head coaches now is just, kind of plucked out of nowhere.
Right.
And
kind of no experience at all.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very good point. I think he had did you watch that, I guess, like an introduction, like media meeting, and what he had to say?
I saw a little bit of it.
Yeah. He was like, I mean, he was pretty straightforward about his experience, and he's like, I basically have no, he goes, I have no idea if I'm going to be good at this, but I'm not going to back down from it. I mean, I kind of liked the attitude I saw from him, but you're right. I mean, I didn't think about it from the standpoint of other assistant coaches around the league or other internal candidates on the team, possibly. Sure. So that's a good point there.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously played for a long time. He was a very good player. Probably learned a lot, maybe about how to run a team by being Peyton Manning's teammate, because Peyton was so involved in everything during his playing days. I think he's a bright guy. I've spoken to him on occasion. It's just bizarre. I mean, you'd think that if he was interested in coaching as a career, that he would have been doing it. They really like him at ESPN, and he comes off very well on television. But there's just a big difference between being on TV and talking about it, and then
actually being an NFL head coach.
Yeah, leading a group of 53 guys and having to oversee a coaching staff, and there could be some resentment on that coaching staff.
Yep.
I would say that if this does work out and they look to hire him full time, I would imagine there'd be a lot of turnover on the coaching staff at the end of the season as he tries to surround himself with his own guys. It's very hard to do that. I mean, it's impossible to do that in the middle of the season, to revamp the coaching staff. But right now, the Colts appear to be a real train wreck, both on the field. They're one of the more disappointing teams in the league, and now off the field with this hire. I think there's a lot of pressure on Jimmy Irsay for this to work, because he was so highly criticized for it.
On paper, the Colts looked like a real competitor, but it's just like their performance does not back up what they look like on paper. And I think this team is a prime example of what having a good head coach, and the right proper coaching at each position and each level. I mean, it's just crazy that on paper, any team can look like a competitor or a Super Bowl contender, but it's just like you've got to have the coaching and the staff to back it up. And
Tanner, I would say, just as important, because I think Frank Reich was a good coach. Just as important as have a quarterback. And when you look at what's happened to the Colts since Andrew Luck surprised them by retiring, right before the 2018 season, they've gone through Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz.
That's right.
Now Matt Ryan. It's been a different guy every year, and that's no way to build a winner.
Right.
It just seems they kept picking these veterans who were discarded by other teams and trying to make it work in Indianapolis. And that's just not how it works. I mean, you got Chris Ballard, I think, is a pretty good GM, but he hasn't drafted a quarterback there that you can say, okay, we're going to develop this guy and he's going to be our quarterback for the future. And I think that was the downfall with Frank Reich, is that he just wasn't given the quarterback really to win with. Now, Philip Rivers did make, I think they went 10-6 in his 1 year in Indy, and they made the playoffs, but they were a quick exit there, and that's the most success they've had since Andrew Luck.
Man. Yeah, all good points, valid points. Let's move on to another topic. NFL rumors, what do you got for us?
I want to just give a shout out to Footballism for giving us that question. If you ain't had a chance, you can definitely look at their account. They're almost 200,000 followers. They post a lot of great videos, a lot of funny videos, a lot of NFL videos from the games. So there's somebody that is a pretty good account to watch for sure. Another question that the last question that we had here was a big one, and I think it's in Gary's wheelhouse. Is the Giants and the Jets going to make the playoffs?
Wow. Well, I would say, looking at the Giants, the next two games are at home against the Texans and the Lions. That should get them to 8 victories. They're at 6-2 right now, so that should get them to 8. And if you're just thinking in terms of the wild card, because I think Dallas is better than the Giants, and certainly the Eagles are. You'd say that the Giants getting to 8, and they maybe need to get to 9, possibly 10 to get the third wild card. I think that sets them up, really well. Assuming they get to 8-2, that means they just got to win a couple of games over their last 7 to get into the playoffs. So I think the Giants have a really good chance, even though they're not as good as maybe their record would indicate. I think they're winning with coaching and playing really hard and playing well in the fourth quarter, especially late in the fourth quarter.
Yes.
But whether it's sustainable to win this way without a prolific or even mildly productive passing game, because the wide receivers are certainly below average. I don't know how sustainable it is, to go make any noise in the playoffs, but I think they have a really good chance. Same thing with the Jets. The Jets have a really good roster. It's just they're not getting much out of the quarterback position, and they have good skill position players. I mean, obviously they really miss Breece Hall, their rookie running back, who's out for the year. But when you look at the Jets wide receivers, and they have some productive tight ends, they're just not getting much out of Zach Wilson at this point. They've kind of turned him or implored him to be more of a game manager, because when they opened it up a little bit against the Patriots a couple of weeks ago, he threw 3 horrible interceptions.
Terrible.
So they've tried to dial it back a little bit with him. But I think both of these New York teams have an excellent chance of making the playoffs, which is a rarity in New York. Make the playoffs together in the same year. And the last decade, the decade of the 2010s, other than the Jets making it to the AFC Championship game in 2010, the Giants obviously winning the Super Bowl in 11, and then making the playoffs in 15. It's been pretty barren around here, especially the last 5 years.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to another question. Of course, that's the big question around the NFL, and I've got a little bit of stuff on that. Is Jay Glazer told us that the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the Bills were the front runners for Odell Beckham Jr. The Giants could certainly use Odell Beckham Jr. because definitely they got some need there at wide receiver. Kenny Galladay's coming back. but we don't know how much he's due. It's been a big disappointment there. So, but Odell Beckham Jr. The came out a couple days ago that the Chiefs, he told his agent that they're still in the mix. So, Odell Beckham Jr. Gary, what are you thinking?
Well, I still wouldn't take the Rams out of the equation, only because they really want him back. He had success there last year. Potentially, he was on the way to being Super Bowl MVP until he tore his ACL again in the Super Bowl. And he lives out there, and he's always wanted to play there. And he only was there for a handful of games last season. So I wouldn't count the Rams out, although they've had plenty of opportunity to sign him and get him back in the building while he's rehabbing, and they haven't offered him the contract that he's looking for. A reunion with the Giants would be, a pretty dramatic story, considering the circumstances that he left under when he was considered just, a problem in the locker room by the coaches. The players always loved him here, but the coaching staff at the time and general manager Dave Gettleman, they're trying to change the culture, and they thought it was imperative to get rid of Beckham. But everything has changed here now. New coaches, new general manager. The locker room is completely turned over. There's only a handful of players that remain from when Beckham played for the Giants. And they, like you said, they certainly have a need. They have Wan'Dale Robinson, their rookie, who's probably right now their most reliable receiver. Galladay has done nothing for a year and a half after they gave him that big money contract.
Big contract.
Sterling Shepard is out for the season with a torn ACL. They traded Kadarius Toney, their first-round pick last year. They really don't have much at wide receiver. So assuming, Beckham is healthy and ready to contribute in December, I would say the Giants would be in the running. I know he visited their facility about 6 weeks ago after Shepard was injured. Brian Daboll said he didn't. It was either Daboll or the general manager Joe Shane said they weren't even aware that he was in the building. I think he just went to the locker room and visited with some players and left. But he's left the door open for a reunion with the Giants, so I wouldn't count them out. Jerry Jones obviously has been very outspoken, and Ezekiel Elliott also spoke up on how much they want, Beckham in Dallas, and you can almost picture him in a Cowboys uniform. He made the signature catch of his career, that one-handed catch on Sunday Night Football.
That's a good point.
So, listen, he's a great player when he's healthy.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. He is.
But twice tearing his ACL.
Same knee, right?
Yeah, same knee, and you have to be concerned about it happening again, or how strong is the knee this time, and you hope he can stay healthy because he's really a dynamic player.
Yeah, and the Giants. The Giants, he's a fan favorite for sure. Like a lot of the followers for us is the Giants. They're really, really recruiting the fans, OBJ, to get the Giants. If he was to get the Cowboys, it'll break the Giants' fans' hearts.
Well, yeah, I think they'd be okay with him signing anywhere but Dallas.
Yep.
But I think part of his decision depends if he's going to sign a contract for more than just the rest of the season. If he's looking to just be concerned with how the rest of the season goes, then you figure he's going to pick a team that has a pretty good chance of getting to the Super Bowl. If he's going to sign a multi-year contract, then he'll think a little bit more long-term.
Right.
And maybe a team, like the Giants would be more attractive to him because, the opportunities that would be available to him off the field in New York, and getting back to a franchise. I mean, he always liked playing here. It's just that I think he was young and immature at that point, and it's 4 years later now, and I think he's grown up a lot and would handle it, a lot differently. Plus, like I said, the coaching staff is different, and Brian Daboll is a very player friendly coach, and I think he would enjoy playing for him. So I think it's wide open, really. Maybe he just goes where the most money is offered, the most guaranteed money is offered.
Yeah.
Maybe he goes where he's got the best chance to get to the Super Bowl this year, or maybe he just goes where he thinks he wants to settle. I read a quote from the other day. He wants to put down some roots. And so
I believe he said that on a podcast, didn't he?
yeah, I'm not sure. I just remember reading the quote, Tanner. And, so it might be where he wants to live.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he had a baby right after the Super Bowl. His girlfriend had a baby, and maybe they want to settle down in an area that they're comfortable living. And so I think there are a lot of factors that go into it. It's interesting to me that he's really going to be in demand, considering what his physical situation is coming off that second ACL. But I think you have to project and look what he can do for your franchise if he indeed is healthy.
Definitely. Well, I was just going to switch gears just for a minute, Gary. I know that, like I said, you've been somebody that I've looked up to for years, and it's the reason I got into this, right? I love the NFL, and the reason we got into, doing the rumors and reaching out and, working through sources to get the news. And, you're one of the big reasons that we do this, because you're somebody we looked at. And I want you to talk to me just for a second for when you were on the inside of the NFL, like how that was. And I know Chris Collinsworth was there, and he's grew on to be an announcer. What was that like?
Well, that was great. I did that for 13 years from 1989, 13 seasons, 89 through 2001. And it was just a tremendous experience for me. I loved every minute of it. That show was very impactful at that period of time. They used to bill it as it's the show that the pros watch. And that was really true, because I was able to walk into any locker room in the league and players would come up to me who I hadn't met and
How cool is
introduce
that?
themselves. Yeah, it was really neat. I can walk through airports and have people come up to me and just say, "Hey, I saw you on Inside the NFL last night. What do you think about such and such?" So that was a fun part of it. Was the exposure that I got, and it's helped me, in many facets of my career since then. And then just working, the first year it was me, Len, and Chris. I'm sorry, me, Len, and Nick, and Chris had just retired, and he was doing features, so he wasn't in the studio. And then the second year they brought Chris into the studio to be one of the three co-hosts, to add a little, I guess, youth and a player who had played recently, to put him on the desk with Nick and Len, who had played in a different generation. And, I continued doing the news and notes segment on that show. And, at various points we added Jimmy Johnson in his 2 years in between Dallas, coaching the Cowboys and coaching the Dolphins. And most of the time he did it from his home in the Florida Keys. Occasionally if he was to be up in New York, he would do it in the studio. And then when we did road shows, he would always fly to where we were doing the road show from, which was about once a month, once every 6 weeks. He would meet us in the city and be on set for that. And then Jerry Glanville joined the show, I think towards the end of the run that I had there. And, he was just, he was just fun to be around, as you can imagine. So it was just, again, I have only positive memories of that show, and the impact it had on my life and my career.
Well, it had a really positive impact on me as well. So I just want to say that was something that was really great, and I really think you did a great job there. I hated to see Lynn Dawson this year pass away. That was rough.
Let me tell you something about Lynn. The nicest man, or the nicest person I've met in this business in the 40 years I've done this. Considering he was a Super Bowl MVP, an accomplished broadcaster. I mean, he did the nightly news in Kansas City all those years. He was like the calming influence on Inside the NFL because Nick was a little more volatile and a little more emotional. So it was that show was nothing negative about what's going on now with that show because it's the cast is different and it's not on HBO anymore. But during that period of time, it really was the show like I said before, the show the pros watch. And not only that, I think it just had a tremendous viewership among football fans because that was the days before you would see every highlight of every game on ESPN or some of these other networks, and then we would have the NFL films highlights, and a lot of the players were mic'd during those games, and so the footage, which took up about 20 to 25% of the hour of our show, all the footage was just really unique and really behind the scenes. And people just loved watching that stuff. And we would show something from every game. It was really, and it was so well produced. It was so professional. It was really just a great show. One of a kind. And there's nothing like it on TV right now, including the current version of Inside the NFL, which is, to me, is nothing compared to what we had going there for a long time.
To what it was.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved, like you were saying, Gary, I loved the highlights. I loved your insight always. It's like, hey, it's Gary Myers time. I get to hear all the news and then also, to see the highlights of the games, see the players mic'd up, seeing them excited and, getting to hear Lynn, Chris, Nick's commentary. So I always got a kick out of Nick when there was an undefeated team.
Absolutely. He was always getting ready to pop the bottle of champagne when that team would lose, and we'd get a kick out of that. And, the other thing that people don't realize, and they wouldn't have any way of knowing this, is that show was just a lot of fun to do. It wasn't like it took an hour to tape and we were in and out of the studio and see you next week. I mean, we were there all day. And so there was a lot of kidding around and joking and teasing and storytelling.
If you can't have fun at work, then work is no good.
Yeah.
So that's very cool.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing for me also, when I think back about, and I started, like I mentioned, in 1989, and they offered me the job when I was still working in Dallas. Now, it turned out that before I did my first show for them, I was hired by the Daily News here in New York. And so all the pieces fit together for me that they were willing to fly me in every week from Dallas to do that show. And I would gladly accept it. But between the time they offered it to me and the time that I actually started doing it in September of '89, I had moved back to New York in May to work for the Daily News. And so, needless to say, the commuting to that show became much, much easier for me just taking the train into the city than having to take a plane into the city. And so it made my life much easier being here in New York and then doing that show for 13 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, I just want to talk real quick about this upcoming week, right? What stories are you really focused on with the games this week?
Well, I think one of them is we talked about earlier was, how are the Colts going to respond to Jeff Saturday? So although that game in and of itself isn't that intriguing, you have two teams with losing records, and the Raiders have been probably the biggest disappointment in the NFL this season. But I'll just be looking to see how, like I mentioned before, how hard do the Colts play for Jeff Saturday, and then I think I want to see if the Bucs can get on somewhat of a roll here. They were fortunate to win the game against the Rams last week. It was a horrendous game when you think it was a matchup of the last two Super Bowl champs who had high-powered offenses and now both are struggling this year
Mhm.
to even get in position to kick field goals. So, Tampa, Seattle in Germany. Obviously, it's an intriguing matchup because it's their first regular season game. Is it in Munich? Is that where it is? I can't remember.
I think so. And one of the things, Gary, that we tweeted out last night was if the Bucks lose, they're still going to be in first place at 4-6.
Yeah, I know with the Falcons losing to Carolina, another just dreadful game on Thursday night. They haven't had a great schedule. You got to
Not
hope
at
that
all.
they give Amazon a better schedule next year because a lot of people watch those games.
Mhm.
Get it ready for the weekend to start and to get stuck.
Not a good debut for Amazon Prime.
Well, I mean, I think the broadcasts have been excellent with Al and Kirk Herbstreit,
Mhm.
and the production has been as good as any of the networks. It's just
Right.
they just didn't give them a slate of games that people would consider to be must watch, and for the money that they're paying, I think they deserve better. And I would be
Absolutely.
really surprised if it's not a better schedule of games for them next year. But anyhow, I'm looking to see if the Bucks can get things going a little bit.
Mhm.
To need to win Sunday to get sole possession of first place in a horrible division is really surprising, and they just haven't resembled certainly their Super Bowl team from 2 years ago, even the team from last year that easily could have beaten. They had that great comeback against the Rams, and they could have won that game and advanced to the championship game. But I think Brady still has it in him. I think to get hot and for the Bucks to win a bunch of games down the stretch, but the switch has got to be flipped at some point. Otherwise, we're going to all come to the conclusion that what we've seen from the Bucks so far is really who they are.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. I figured that the Bucks definitely got to get on a roll, got to get something going. I think that's going to be pretty big. Like you said, I think the Colts is a game that is very intriguing. Josh McDaniel, a lot of the Raider fans want him going already.
Well,
So
that's
that's
unfortunate. You got to give a coach a chance, although he took over a team that did make the playoffs last year. I mean, they were in the wild card game and could have beaten the Bengals. So it's not like he took over a team that was 4-13 last year. Guys, the other game I'm really intrigued by is Buffalo and the Vikings. It's the Vikings they're playing, but more so because I want to see what's up with Josh Allen and his elbow.
And his elbow, yeah. That's a big question mark.
If he is going to play in that game, and I guess we won't know until Sunday, how effective can he be? Now, he got hurt last week against the Jets, and it's important to note that after getting injured, his final pass of the game traveled like 69 and a half yards in the air, which would not be an indication of a guy who's got a serious elbow problem.
No.
But we don't know exactly what's happened, in the time since Sunday and, what the diagnosis is.
I know he's logged 2 do not participates in practice. I don't think he's practiced at all week.
Okay.
They're trying to really, I guess, just rest that elbow. And it's looking like, at the moment, it looks like Case Keenum is going to be lined up to start, but they haven't said anything. They're not going to confirm anything probably until game time.
Yeah, I mean, as good as the Bills have been this year,
yeah,
the Jets and the Dolphins are right behind them. So there's not a lot of margin for error here. And I'm just trying to think. Yeah, the Bills and the Jets both. The Dolphins and the Jets have already both beaten Buffalo. They haven't played in Buffalo yet. But they already, have that one victory over them, with a chance to sweep and have a tiebreaker. So, Case Keenum is a capable backup, and it'd be intriguing if he's the guy, if he does start Sunday, if Josh Allen can't go, that he's starting against his
red
team,
hot Minnesota Vikings.
Well, his former team, and he'd be throwing to Stephon Diggs, And that was the combination of Minnesota a few years ago for the Minneapolis Miracle.
Good point. Yeah.
And now they'd be going against their former team. So we'll see what happens with Josh. I think when you have an elbow injury on a quarterback, it's always, or elbow or shoulder, it's always a major concern. And, you have to trust the doctors. And if they're going to prescribe rest is the only way to get this thing to calm down, then in the long run, they're going to be better off sitting him down for a few weeks and trying to get his elbow right than rushing him back and potentially making it worse.
Yeah, one of the things I'll mention to you, Gary, is Ryan Fitzpatrick was talking about it last night on the nightcap, that, it was the reason that he came in for the Bengals was because Carson Palmer had the same injury and he didn't sit out, and he decided to come in, and when he did, it knocked him out for the season.
Yeah, I mean, every injury is different. Josh had the same thing or something very similar in his rookie year in 2018, and he sat out 4 games. So, again, I don't know if the severity this time is similar to what it was in 2018, but that's what they did 4 years ago.
Great. Well, I know that we've took up a lot of Gary's time, but we really, really appreciate him. It's an honor for me to have him on here. Like I said, he's somebody that I've looked up to for years. Gary, tell us anything that's going on your side of the fence, anything that you're working on.
Well, if I was to turn the camera around, I'd show you the desk I'm working on here. It's got piles and piles of transcripts for an interview from a book that I'm just about finishing up, hopefully in the next week, and it's going to come out next September.
Great.
It's called Once a Giant, the story of victory, tragedy, and life after football. And it's about the 1986 Giants Super Bowl championship team and how they've dealt with life after football. So I really think this is an important book from the standpoint that probably the biggest issue facing players of yesterday, meaning retired players of today, and future generations of players, what's their life going to look like when they're in their 50s and 60s? And we've heard a lot of individual stories with CTE and players, tragically committing suicide as a result, and players having trouble walking, memory loss issues. So I thought it was really important to write a book that would address a lot of this. And so I decided to concentrate on one team, and I picked the 86 Giants because I always wanted to do a book. I've written 5 books, but I've never done a New York centric type book. And I always wanted to do that in, my home area. And this team is filled with players now who are in their 50s and 60s. So it was the age group I wanted to concentrate on. So I decided to tell the story of the 86 team, not necessarily the 86 season, because that's been done so many times, especially right after they won the championship. So I sprinkle in some memorable moments from that season, but really concentrate more on the behind-the-scenes stuff about player relationships and how they felt about Parcells and Belichick and what the relationship was between Parcells and Belichick. Did anybody in that period of time look at Belichick and think, boy, this guy's going to go on and potentially be remembered as the greatest coach in NFL history? And there's a lot of really funny stories in the book, as well as some story. I just tell people it's heartwarming and heartbreaking, the stories that I tell in this book. And so, again, it's coming out right around the start of the 2023 season. And hopefully people who are watching and listening to your podcast will want to pick it up.
Yeah, definitely. We have a lot of great Giant followers, and definitely I know they will be excited to pick that up. I'm excited to pick that up myself and read it. Where will we be able to get that, Gary?
Well, just, any place where people, bookstores, if people still go into bookstores, but, certainly on Amazon and, all these different websites where they sell books. And we're going to do, pretty good publicity tour on this as well. So, I'll have further information for people, where they can get it at the appropriate time, where they can pre-order it if so desired.
Right. Okay. Great. Great. I'm excited about this. Definitely being a big football fan. The Giants that year was a very special year. Have a lot of great players in there, and like you said, there's a lot of players now that's suffering from a lot of different things, and I think it's very crucial to bring that up and bring notice on that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say one other thing about it. I think people are
Mhm.
going to be blown away by some of the experiences that these players have gone through, health wise, um, levels of despair that they've experienced, things they considered doing. And you can use your imagination on that to relieve themselves of the situation they were in. Fortunately, they didn't follow through on that. Um, there's really a lot of stories in this book that, like I said, heartbreaking and heartwarming, and a good share of both of those.
Great, great. Well, definitely, we're going to be really glad to have it, and definitely, you are our first guest on the podcast, and I did that for a reason because you're very special to NFL rumors for sure. And
Well, that's really nice to hear. I appreciate it. I'm happy to come on with you guys, and I wish you a lot of luck with the podcast.
well,
Appreciate that.
thank you, Tanner. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on, just really quick, and where everybody can find you.
Yeah, so Tanner Phifer NFL on Twitter and Phifer Football on Instagram. The podcast is up on YouTube. It's going to be available basically on every podcast platform: Apple, Spotify, I believe Stitcher, Pocket Cast, all of these other platforms as well. So you can find us all there. We're very, very pleased to have Gary Myers, NFL legend, just grateful to have you as our first guest on this podcast. We can really see this podcast going places. We've already got some great stats on it just in the first 2 weeks of doing this. So we're glad that you could be a part of this, and we're just grateful
I'm
for your
honored
time.
that I'm the first guest. So
Yes, sir.
Great.
Do you have anything to say as an outro today?
you're talking to Mr. NFL Rumors or to me?
Anybody.
No, I just think that the second half, once we get to Thanksgiving of any season, when I covered the Cowboys in Dallas, Tom Landry always called that the turn for home. The Cowboys would have a Sunday game and then the Thanksgiving game and then have the 10 days off. And
Yep.
once they got through the Thanksgiving game, at that point in time, there was usually 4 games left in the season, the final quarter of the season. The schedule's a little bit different now, but he used to call that was the turn for home. That's when you want to be playing your best football. And I think that still holds true, that once we get to Thanksgiving weekend and maybe the weekend after, that's when things start to sort themselves out.
Yeah.
And you start to be able to identify the teams that are going to be the real serious contenders for the Super Bowl. So that's always exciting. We're reaching what I can always consider to be the most, exciting and fun part of the season.
Well, definitely. I'm excited about that too, and excited to see what can happen with these New York teams too, Gary. And we're just going to keep following you with that. And we love your commentary there on Twitter. And also, guys, make sure that you're following NFL Rumors. We're almost at 178,000 followers. So, we really appreciate all the followers and their support. And, keep in line for that OBJ news. We'll, when we hear it, we'll break it for you. And we'll break down all the rumors that's going on around the NFL. So keep on the lookout, and make sure you turn your notifications on, and we'll let Tanner play us out.
Yep. I'll play that outro right now. There we go.